Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to see so many folks here today. This is the Governmental Affairs Local Service Delivery Subcommittee. The purpose of our meeting is to gather information and up to attain better understanding of the delivery of local services throughout our state. Georgia is a very diverse state. In land, we have majestic mountains. We have beautiful seashores. We have abundant forest and agricultural land. We have major international manufacturing. We have large metropolitan cities and quaint rural communities. Georgia has it all, truly. However, over the last several years, it's become evident that our citizens do not have equitable delivery of services. We can and will discuss everything from taxes, local and state, revenue sharing, law enforcement, police and sheriff, government structures for cities and counties, budgets, what's constitutional officers, what's mandated, growth, urban versus renewal, versus rural. And we're going to look at some of the advantages and disadvantages there is to both large and small and everything in between. Many things that we've looked at and heard from our constituents affect everybody in the state. Are medical services available in all the communities? What are the return time if you need an ambulance or car for those services? We need to look at regional and intergovernmental agreements and how they can share services. On behalf of the committee, we thank each of our presenters and appreciate everyone being here today. We look forward to hearing from all of you throughout these meetings. We're ready to start our meeting. And if we could have our first presenter, please. Let's see. Rusty Haygood. He's with the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon. To each of the committee members, it's good to see you again. It has been a few months since we got to talk, but I wanted to start, and I've come with two things today, but I'm willing to pivot if you want me to, Madam Chair. I've got some demographic statistics about the state and start there and look at where we are as a state. This is very high level, not drilled down at all. But start there, and then I was asked to come and talk a little bit about what DCA does and how we interact with communities across the state. I'll do that if you need me to clarify anything or stop talking. I'm happy to do whatever the chair prefers. Let's start very high level. Population in the state has been increasing. That's no surprise to anyone. You've seen the census numbers that have come out in the last couple of years, and they indicated that trend continued. I wanted to look just one layer below state level, though, and look at a couple of regions of the state and really put some numbers to that so we can conceptualize where the population is, what the changes are, and how that goes. Let's start with the 4 largest counties in the state. Fulton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cobb. In the year 2000, we were at just over 2.6 million people in those 4 counties, and that was just a shade under 33%. That number has increased by almost 1 million over the last 20 years. We're over 3.5 million, but the important part of that number is those 4 counties continue to become a larger portion of the state's population. So 1/3 of the state's population in those 4 counties, 2/3 in the balance of the other 155. Let's go out just a little bit further and talk about what I'm going to call the 10 metro counties. We can talk about what counties may or may not be the core 10 to you, but that's what we call the Atlanta region, and 3.4 million in the year 2000. And that has gone up by over 1.3 million during the last 20 years. Again, the percentage has gone up. But if you remember back on the last slide, the difference between 2000 and 2020 was only 0.5% for those 4 counties. Now the difference is 2.1%. These other 6 counties are really growing at a rapid rate. So significant population growth within those counties. And again, with 10 of the 159 counties, we're talking about 44% of the state's population. To look at it a little differently, if we go back to the year 2000 and we look in a comparison with 2020, you don't see a large difference of counties with populations less than 25,000. There is some, specifically up there in the North Georgia mountains is where you see the biggest concentration of those that have flipped. But these maps look very similar in total when you compare the population 20 years ago with present day. When we look at 50,000, you do see some more growth, and it shouldn't be surprising as we've talked about it. It's surrounding that metro core. We also see the balance of the state staying mainly the same. There haven't been a lot of counties, I believe the number's 5, that have gone above the 50,000 person threshold between 2000 and 2020. And here's where I think we start seeing some interesting contrast. I've got population north of I-20 and I-85 generally. We took a little bit of liberty there as we looked at this, but you see the population of those counties has increased almost 2 million over the 20-year period. And those counties right there represent more than 60% of the state's population. And we do not have 60% of the number of counties in that orange shaded area. 6.7 million people there in the counties that are north, generally north of those 2 interstates. Then we see another contrast. The population south of Macon, and that's a general statement. It's a line that we have drawn across the lower portion of the state. If my math is correct, that's 79 of the 159 counties, half. And we are reflecting today less than a quarter of the state's population. Now, almost 2.5 million people in that area. There are 900,000 people in Houston, Bibb, Chatham, Muskogee, and Lowndes counties. That leaves 1.5 million in 74 counties, excuse me. So we see a drastic difference between population growth in North Georgia. Population growth continues in South Georgia. The numbers are higher, but as a percentage of the state's population, it's dwindling. We see a significant decrease in the amount of the state's population, the percentage of the state's population, more than 3% less of the total pie than there was 20 years ago. So we continue to see these trends. I only referred to the 2000 and the 2020 numbers as I've talked through this, but 2010 is much the same. You're going to see those trends that were present in 2010, just as they have been continuing through 2020. So I wanted to lay that out just before we got started, just so that we had the data in front of us to begin the conversation. And as we talk through this, Madam Chair, you alluded to a whole host of things that the committee is going to be looking at as it begins its work. But hopefully this will be a little bit of a foundation that we can work off of and talk off of, because issues, quite frankly, are different in growing communities and those that are losing population. And there are a number of counties within the state that showed a decline in population between 2010 and 2020. If you look at it between 2000 and 2020, it's not as stark, because there were quite a few counties that saw an increase from 2000 to 2010, but they have seen a decline from 2010 to 2020. I don't have good guesses as to why that might be across the board, but I went with this graphic as opposed to the other one simply because the last 10 years, that population has reflected a decline in each of these counties within the state. I will switch over now and talk a little bit about DCA and how we intersect with communities, if that's okay. Our mission is to help build strong, vibrant communities. And to accomplish that mission, we really try to be impactful in virtually everything that happens within a community. There are so many things that we touch as an agency. In fact, there are probably north of 70 different programs that we administer, touch, work with on a regular basis. So a lot of ways that we're intersecting with communities across the state. Some of these areas, housing, infrastructure, economic development, planning, historic preservation. As of 2020, the Historic Preservation Division moved from DNR to DCA. So that's an addition to what we are involved with on a regular basis. And then we're also involved with small businesses and downtown development. I'm a believer that the heart and the soul of most small communities across the state are those downtowns. And that's an important part of our focus as an agency. And what I'm going to do is not touch on every program that we have. We'd be here all week, but I'm just going to go very high level, happy to dive down in any areas that you see fit as I conclude. We really touch many facets of housing and most facets of housing in communities, with the exception of market-driven housing development. And there is the possibility for us to be involved in down payment assistance to folks that are buying those homes within communities. We have the state home mortgage program and down payment assistance that can work to lower that principal for first-time home buyers. We work in the homelessness space. We don't provide homeless services directly, but we have funding that flows through us to provide services through other agencies that really have that as a focus. One of the tools that we have to create new housing across the state is the housing tax credits. And we have, I saw a number this morning that was over 160,000 units that have been created over the life of that program within the state. And that's a tremendous number. And today, I think we experience housing issues in every corner of the state, and we need to make sure that we continue to utilize all the tools that are in our repository to try to address those issues that are facing communities across the state. We do have a lot of federal funds and some state funds as well that we are able to grant out, and a lot of those grant awards focus on public infrastructure and economic development. And we do that in a whole host of ways. Things that we are traditionally involved in: water, sewer, roads. We do public facilities in communities as well. Within the economic development space, when you hear an announcement by the Department of Economic Development, there's a discretionary state grant involved. We are the financing piece of that transaction. They are the sales team, we're the financing piece, and we work hand in glove with them. We are regularly in communication with them and have a great relationship there. And through the course of the pandemic, we did get some CARES Act funding that flowed through us. And after we evaluated all of the options, one of the things that we landed on was a space where there wasn't a lot of funding flowing already. And we looked at food banks across the state. And we have been able to grant $67 million to food banks across the state in order for them to build that capacity. And that capacity is really the building for them to be able to acquire food and be prepared for whether it be another pandemic, whether it be a financial downturn, whatever the case may be, make sure that they are ready for that. I mentioned just a moment ago, Historic Preservation Division coming over to the Department of Community Affairs. We administer the state historic preservation tax credits. We work with Washington on federal credits as well. We are the agency that folks go to for the National Register and Georgia Register nominations. We've got a review board that meets twice a year to add properties to that. The Fairview School in Cave Spring is what's pictured there. That's an African-American school that was hidden in the woods and in deplorable condition when it was found. Nobody really knew it was there, but when they found it, it was restored. And this is only one of the buildings that was on the property at the time of the school's functioning. But as you can see, that's a jewel for the community now, and it took an eyesore and turned it into something that was very beneficial for them. In planning and revitalization, I think this is critical for downtowns across the state that I'll get to at the end, but for every community throughout the state. I'm a believer that you need to be planning if you're growing, if you're not growing or if you're losing population. And I think that hits most everybody in the state. And I say that because there are so many different circumstances that are impacting you. If you're growing, you're going to have demands on your infrastructure. If you're losing population, you're still going to have the costs that are associated with that infrastructure, fewer people to pay for it. How are you going to do that? So the planning component of this is very important to me. It's very important to our agency. It's the foundation upon which we were created many years ago. And that's taken a number of twists and turns over the years. And we've had new areas that we have begun to look in, things that we didn't really know were issues previously. Broadband, for instance, that really emerged pre-pandemic, and we had started work mapping the unserved areas across the state before the pandemic hit. And whenever that happened, we were able to work with the Department of Education and others to make sure we knew where the students that did not have access to internet services were, and there were some resources that were able to be deployed as a result of that. Great foresight by the legislature a handful of years before the pandemic allowed us, Georgia Technology Authority and Carl Vinson Institute of Government, to work together in order to do that mapping exercise. That mapping exercise from Georgia has been touted on Capitol Hill in congressional hearings. Fantastic work that's been done across the state, and it's thanks to the foresight that y'all had a couple of years ago. Our initiative for community housing is a fantastic tool that's available within the state. Really what that is a planning focused exercise for communities to enter into. It's a 3-year program. And as a result of that, they come out with a team within the community, come out with a plan. And that plan is going to help guide them toward federal, state, local resources that they can make an impact in their community. And the revitalization designations have been very important for the downtowns. We have opportunity zones. They've been on the books for quite a while. About 6 years ago, a rural zone was created by the General Assembly. We administer that program. Up to 10 downtowns a year can be put into the rural zone program. What that basically does is it allows tax credits, rehabilitation credits, and acquisition credits for developers and or businesses that go into the downtowns that have seen better days. And the intent of that is to revitalize the rural downtowns, bring them back to be the star of that community and get the economic opportunity flowing again within communities. I won't spend much time on small business and downtown development because I started hitting on that, but I do want to make you aware that we are actively working with U.S. Treasury on the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This is version 2.0. There was a State Small Business Credit Initiative. We shorten it to SSBCI out of the financial crisis about a decade ago. And version 2.0 was authorized by Congress. And we're expecting somewhere between $150 and $200 million coming to the state that we're going to administer. We're looking to do a couple of things. We had a lending program that we ran in conjunction with banks in version 1.0. We're going to continue that. There was funding that was allocated to the CDFIs across the state. We're going to continue that because they do small business lending targeted to unserved and underserved populations. And that was very important. And we're adding a third component this time, which will be providing access to venture capital for some of those emerging firms within the state. All of that's being done with money coming down from Washington. That's a fantastic thing. No state dollars associated with that. It's just an injection of 150 to 200 million that we're anticipating. Final numbers to be determined, but hopefully we'll get a response from Treasury very soon and be able to start deploying those resources. That is the extent of what I had prepared, but I'm more than willing to try to answer questions that you have, Madam Chair, or the committee if you wish.
You do have a couple of questions. Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple. When you were talking about housing, I saw at the bottom you had housing opportunities for persons with AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
Are we also doing anything for vets?
There are some resources that are available specifically to people in law enforcement related programs. That's some down payment assistance. I unfortunately am not 100% sure about any other programs with vets, but I will find that answer for you, and we'll get that back to you in the committee ASAP.
Okay. And the other question I had was about downtowns. I live in Clayton County,
Yes, ma'am.
and one of the things that's always talked about is Terra Boulevard. And Terra Boulevard is not a traditional downtown area, but it's the first area once you drop off of 75. So
Correct.
it's the face of the county. So are there funding that is available, since it's not a traditional downtown, but it is, I guess during that time, it was considered to be the downtown area?
Couple of ways to go down that path to answer your question. As far as our state small business credit initiative, absolutely, that's a program that's available everywhere in the state, and that's loans to businesses to get equipment, to purchase buildings, you name it. So yes, we do have funds that can be accessed by those businesses to do those types of things. Depending on entitlement status of communities, impacts some of our other funds, specifically the funding that we have from HUD. Any entitlement community must use what HUD allocates to them on an annual basis. We are prohibited from granting our funds into those entitlement areas. So I think that's a resource that could be looked at. I don't know what Clayton County uses funding for, but definitely something that can be explored.
Thank you. Let's see, Representative Maynard, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is about, you talked about the population statistics in North Georgia and South Georgia, and it seemed like Middle Georgia was missing out of there. So tell me why.
The contrast was so stark with North Georgia growing as rapidly as it is, and South Georgia still growing, but losing population share in the state. Middle Georgia is more consistent, but Middle Georgia, that middle band across the state, I guess we could say Columbus to Macon to Augusta and a little bit north of that, probably up to South Metro, is still growing.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other follow-up question. Dooley County, I believe, lost the most population out of all of the counties. Where is that? Would that be in your south, since it said Macon?
It is.
And since DCA is looking at revitalizing different communities, is the thought process for DCA to figure out more economic development opportunities in those areas that are losing population, or is the vision to look at the populations that are significantly expanding and trying to create infrastructure for the expansion? Or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both and a little bit of neither, if I could go there. Our objective is to work with those communities that want to become stronger, more vibrant. And this, I'm not speaking of any county within the state. So let's take the one that was referenced out of the equation. Any community that's going to come to us, and we've got regional reps in each part of the state, we're going to work with them, whatever their objective and their desire is. We're solely focused on what that community's wishes and vision for what they want their community to be in the future. We aren't going to go in and try to drive an agenda in a community, but we are always ready and willing to come in and sit down with them or roll up our sleeves and try to figure out ways to get from where they are to where they say they want to go.
Thank you. I actually have a question also. It really has to do with the small business credits and how those work. Do you have a specific type of business, or are they open to any kind of business?
It's open to most legal, ethical businesses. And we do have a whole host of business sectors that have been represented in the past. What we haven't seen previously is that emerging tech related business sector. But whenever we put an application into Treasury, we included funding for venture capital. that equity position moving forward. And we think that that's going to help us hit more different sectors and hopefully get that tech sector boosted even more within the state.
Do you know, is it more in urban or rural areas, or is it really across the board?
We have seen most of our loans, if I'm remembering the map correctly, where we kind of plotted everything on there, most would be more rural centric. We have done loans in more metro areas as well. But the intent is for us to serve the entire state, and the loan programs that we administer with conventional lenders across the state. And our intent is to continue to go out, get more banks signed on to participate in the program and work through them. What happens is when we are a lender in partnership with the banks, we will either buy a portion of the loan from them. That gives them a much stronger position for them to be in. Ultimately, what happens is the borrower benefits more whenever there's less risk to the bank. The other program that we administer is a credit guarantee program where we act as a backstop behind the bank, and the bank has the entire loan.
Okay, because so it could be a dress shop, or it could be a coffee shop, or a computer shop.
Absolutely.
Just as long as it's a sound company, because the state is investing. It can't be something that isn't going to succeed. You do look for it to be.
We
a
absolutely
success.
do.
Okay, and it ties in with the local banks.
Yes, absolutely. We have an underwriting team, and most of them have been bankers in their previous work experience. So they are looking at that through the eyes how a lender would, and we're doing that to make sure that we're utilizing the resources that have been entrusted us as best as possible.
Okay, thank you. We have online Representative Sands. You have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Deputy Commissioner Haygood, this might be more of a question for the regional planning model we have, but is there, for the counties that you mentioned under 25,000, is there any DCA provided technical assistance for their functional obligations as county governments? And if so, what is the most utilized of those services?
In many of the regional commissions, they provide some of what you're talking about. I would be remiss if I tried to list off all that I recall about the role of those regional commissions. They are very valuable partners with us and with communities across the state. As far as the technical assistance, our regional team, we have 12 regional reps that are active and engaged with the communities all across the state. And as they go out, they're trying to troubleshoot and be the eyes and ears within our agency. Their role is to connect those needs with folks within our agency that can provide the assistance that the community needs, as well as other state, federal, nonprofit, whatever resources may be available. Specific to what we see the most, I'll have to think on that. I will send you an email with some thoughts after I think through what might be the most. I would hate to give you a knee-jerk reaction and misspeak, but I will commit to getting back to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
We have Representative Bernal. You have another question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier, you had mentioned that you all work with the other state agencies. And so one of the things I thought about, do you work in terms of the marketing or training? Because a lot of times what happens with, new businesses that come up is that they have an idea, but then they're not successful because either they don't know how to market or they haven't had the training, like it's okay if I'm doing it in my house.
Right.
But then when I move from my house to a building and I have to keep supply and everything. So do you all work hand in hand together to provide those services also?
Absolutely. And we regularly have conversations with and work hand in hand with the small business development centers. that's housed at UGA, and
Mhm.
they have locations all across the state. That's one of the primary resources that our Small Business Credit Initiative points those folks to.
Okay.
What we want to do is when we make a loan to someone, make sure that they're viable, they're strong, they can sustain this, and put them in a position to succeed rather than act too quickly before they're ready.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions, but I do want to take a moment to thank you
Yes, ma'am.
and the agency. Quite frankly, my community is very familiar with you and the things that you do. Honestly, there are so many good programs that we utilize, but it does take the local community to recognize that they're there. And whether it be housing or downtown preservations, all of those things are included. And rest assured, we will be calling on you for some research.
We will be happy to.
Thank you very
comply.
much. We
Yes,
appreciate
ma'am.
it. Before we go on to our next speaker, I think we need to take a moment and let the committee introduce themselves. We know who each other are, but y'all may not know who we are. So we're going to start with Representative Bernal. If you would identify yourself and where you're from and anything you want to say about yourself.
Rhonda Bruneau. I represent District 77. It's in Clayton County. Currently, I cover the city of Riverdale, unincorporated Riverdale, unincorporated Morrow, and unincorporated Jonesboro. But next year, due to redistricting, I'll go up 314. So the airport will be a part of my district. That'll be the biggest change. And I'm a retired educator.
Representative Maynor.
My name is Misha Maynor. I am representative of House District 56, and House District 56 includes the heart of Atlanta. So I have the Georgia Tech campus. My intern here is from Georgia Tech in the back. And I also have the AUCC, SCAD. I have a lot of college campuses in my district. Also, I have right now the areas over by Piedmont Park, which includes Ansley and Sherwood Forest. I also have Midtown and Southwest Atlanta, where the Benz Stadium is. With redistricting, I'm losing that Ansley Park, Sherwood Forest area and picking up a more southern parts of Southwest Atlanta. And glad to be here. I'm a physical therapist by trade.
Thank you. Let's see. Chairman Oliver.
I'm Mary Margaret Oliver. House District 82 is in the middle of DeKalb. Currently, I represent 4 cities: Decatur, Brookhaven, Atlanta, and Chamblee, and unincorporated DeKalb, including all of the Emory campus, which is the largest private employer in the Atlanta area. Redistricting takes me a little south and a little east, and I lose Chamblee, but I continue to represent all of the middle DeKalb area.
Thank you. Let's see. Chairman Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Jay Collins. I chair the House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee. I represent Villa Rica, Temple, and in redistricting, I will come down and catch 2 precincts in northern Carrollton. So the northeast corner of Carroll County are the good people that I represent. I'm a funeral director by trade. I started my business 20 years ago out in Villa Rica and celebrated my 20th anniversary on July the 1st. I was also elected to 4 four-year terms to serve as mayor of the city of Villa Rica. So I have a love and affinity for local government. Pleasure to be here with you, members of the committee.
Thank you. Representative Blackman.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Shaw Blackman. I'm from Houston County. I'm a small business person. Been in for 7 years now, and I'll hand it off back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Wood.
Thank you. I'm Rick Williams from down in Baldwin County. I represent District 145, Millersville, part of Putnam County. And finishing up my term in the House after 6 years, 3 terms. I am the Republican nominee for the Senate for the 25th District. So I'll be going across the hall next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Victor Anderson, I'm the representative for District 10. District 10 currently is about 2/3 of Habersham and about 2/3 of White County. The new District 10 will be more of Habersham and all of Rabun County. So it's a significant change, but it's a good change. It's not bad. And I'm in this year is the second year of my first term. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm Darlene Taylor, and I'm from District 173. I'm one of those rural South Georgia people, and I've been up here 12 years. And I've served on this committee for 12 years, and it is an experience to see how diverse our state is. And I appreciate everyone being here. So we'll go on to our next speaker. And if I could get Mr. James Burgess, and he is a former executive director of the Georgia Municipal Association, and he has a wealth of knowledge. So we are looking forward to hearing from him. If you would go to the microphone at the podium. Thank you. Would you prefer to sit at the table? We have a table if you would prefer to sit.
You know, I would if that would be okay.
Please go to the table. Thank you, you're right. I'm going to take a moment. Representative Sands, I totally forgot you were online. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen Sains, I represent currently the majority of Camden, portions of Ware and Charlton County, and will represent all of Camden and a portion of Glenn, which are two areas Deputy Commissioner Haygood noted as a few of the ones that have population increase. So thank you for hosting this. It's a timely conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity of being here today. I would like to introduce my wife, Madeline, who came with me. Madeline and I both retired in 1995, and she from Fulton County, and myself, I retired from the Municipal Association. I've been involved in local government for really over 50 years. If you also include my 14 years as mayor of Social Circle, I've got about 65 years of service. Can you all hear me okay? Everybody okay? So I've been at this business a long time. I think of Mary Margaret Oliver when some 30 or 40 years ago, we used to play golf at the Druid Hills Golf Course with another gentleman by the name of John Blackman. As I recall, he was a revenue commissioner. And we played for a quarter hole, and she usually took our money, but she was a good golfer. We were just trying to keep up. You all have received a very complete paper presenting the history of service delivery in Georgia prepared by Tom Gell. And I'm assuming that you all received that paper. I also submitted you another paper on county consolidation, just a one-page opinion paper. Well, rather than going all the way back through Tom's paper, which he's presented, because it's a good history of service delivery, of how it's evolved over years, I would just try to quickly summarize what our situation is with regard to service delivery. I've witnessed so many reforms with regard to service delivery over the last 50 years, really starting back with the plan of improvement, and then the whole movement to city-county consolidation. I was involved in several of the efforts to see counties consolidate with cities. My first project was, as an attorney, I wrote some of the legal documents and charters. Athens Clarke County was my first, and the second was Columbus Muskogee. That was the first success successful consolidation in the state. And then I was involved in a number of others, Albany, Doherty, Brunswick, Glen. And in those times, it was difficult to have a consolidated city county because you had to have a separate vote in and out. The law was later changed so we could have one cumulative vote. And then there were a number of proposals for county consolidation, and the most significant proposal that was very controversial was by Kill Townsend in 1985. And I had a great admiration for Kill. He was one of the few Republicans in an overwhelmingly Democratic House, and he was almost run out of state with his proposal to consolidate counties. And but it was, again, it was another attempt to deal with the whole service delivery issue. And then in more recent years, the whole cityhood movement, where cities began to form around our particularly in our urban counties such as Fulton, which is now almost totally municipalized. You have starting with Sandy Springs. I was a member of the commission that created Sandy Springs, and later I was on the commission that created Stonecrest. So you had that whole cityhood movement. You know, the interesting thing about that is that if you had a different kind of service delivery system in place, you wouldn't have had the need for all of these cities to spring up all over our urban counties. If you compare our state with, say, a state like North Carolina, North Carolina has what you might call automatic annexation powers, or legally they're called unilateral powers of annexation. They also have extraterritorial planning and zoning powers, where they can actually plan and zone the suburban unincorporated area as it grows, as it urbanizes, and they can plan up to 2 to 3 miles of their corporate limits. So that area is built, it's planned before it's taking into the city. And then once it reaches a certain density of population, say 200 persons per acre, or whatever the figure is, the city automatically adjusts its boundaries. And those are great laws. They really, in my effect, saved many of the major cities of North Carolina. A city like Charlotte, they don't have all the little cities springing up around it as the major city. Had we had a similar service delivery statute or a law in this state, Atlanta today would be a totally different kind of city. You wouldn't have the cities springing up around it. It'd be a city of over 1 million people rather than a city of 500,000 people. So that whole city movement was a significant development in when you look at the whole span of our service delivery evolvement over the years. And then you come into 1972, and you had an interesting development there. The counties were beginning to urbanize as people from rural areas moved into the county, left the farms, wanted to go to the city. They got to the city, wanted to go back to the more of the open areas of the county, and began to demand urban type services such as garbage collection, street cleaning, police. But the county had no power to provide those services. They sort of punched at the Constitution and got local amendments to give them authorities, specific authorities. But it was really a hodgepodge of figuring out how the county could get these powers. And I know 3 lawyers that I had worked with at the time. One was from Columbus, Lenny Davis, Jimmy Blackman, and Bill Blanks. They came up with a scheme and really presented it to Elmer George, who was then the director of the Municipal Association. And they convinced him it was a good idea. They said, if we can give counties these powers to provide these same services that cities provide, streets, garbage collection, police, and fire, the county will then be able, under the intergovernmental contract clause of the Constitution, will be able then to contract with the city and thereby extend the city services through a contractual relationship out into the suburban areas of the county. Well, Elmer said, you know, that may work. But then he found just the opposite occurred. Once the counties got the legal power to provide urban services, they began to compete with cities. And then you begin to have fragmentation, duplication, tax inequity, turf battles, the whole drill. So then we had to, so that basically is our urban service system. It's a dual system. Amendment 19 empowers counties to provide 15 urban services, the same services that cities can provide. So there is, despite, well, let me go a little bit further. There, as you look at the turf battles, particularly the battle over double taxation, which was huge all over the state, Governor Miller in 1983 created a local government commission, and they made a number of recommendations to improve service delivery, but none of those recommendations resulted in any kind of legislation. They were not implemented. And finally, the Future Communities Commission in 93 came up with a plan which made some sense. They said, well, let's just do this. Let's require cities and counties to develop a service delivery plan. And that plan would basically do three things. It would deal with duplication. It would be a plan to eliminate duplication. It would be a plan to deal with tax inequity or the double taxation issue. And it would deal with the third component, which was land use compatibility. And that evolved into the enactment of the adoption of House Bill 489, which requires the filing of a service delivery strategy with the state, updated every 10 years or filed every 10 years and updated as needed. And I think that was a great improvement in our service delivery system. But despite the enactment of that law, there continues to be, even today, turf battles, some duplication, some conflicts, some tax inequity, and and particularly going on right now, the negotiations that are going all over the state with regard to lost, and that has to be done every 10 years, and there's a lot of conflict there. So that's basically our service delivery system. I call it a dual service delivery system. And there's one thing that Tom Gale left out of his paper, which I think is a very significant service delivery improvement. In 2010, Governor Sonny Perdue, through his New Georgia initiative, reorganized what were then RDCs. There were 16. He reorganized them and renamed them as regional commissions. He created 12 regional commissions. Now, here's the significant point of that initiative. He gave regional commissions the power to provide direct urban services. In other words, a regional commission can provide all of the services, all the 15 services that are enumerated in Amendment 19, or what you call the Equalization Amendment or the Supplementary Powers Amendment. That, to me, is a great tool to help the small communities of rural Georgia. It's just, it's amazing to me that they've not taken advantage of it. Now, our regional commissions do a great job in planning and programs for the aging and historic preservation, but very few of them provide any kind of urban services that was authorized by this statute. When you think about that, what they could do with it, they could do records, solid waste management, jails, police recruitment, personnel management, bulk purchasing. There are just 30 or 40 things they could do to help our rural declining counties. And I'll give you one example. Let me just check my notes. Let's take jails. Sly County, with a population of about 5,000, borders 4 other counties: Marion, Sumter, Macon, and Taylor. Those counties are within, the courthouses of those counties are within a 15 to 30-minute drive of Sly County. You've got 5 jails within a 30-mile drive of each other. Those jails are way under capacity. I think the largest, I think Sumter has perhaps the largest capacity, about 47 to 50%. Some of them are 20 or 30%. That is a great opportunity just for the creation of regional jails, and that would help those communities. Those communities are having to maintain that structure, but they're declining in population. And the question I think was raised a minute ago, what's the, of the smallest county, what's the one that lost the greatest amount of population? That was Baker County. Baker County from 2020 lost almost 26% of its population. So that leads me into my last comment that I want to talk to you about. And that's the one that I really feel very passionate about, is the plight of our declining rural counties. For example, 68 of Georgia's 159 counties lost population since 2010. 36 of those counties have populations of less than 10,000. Some of those counties lost anywhere from 31% to 75% of their population since 1940. One county, which lost 24% of its population from 2010, now has an estimated 2022 population of 1,312 people. Can you imagine 1,312 people? Well, can you imagine the plight of that county when it reaches, based on trends, it'll be down to 500 or 600 people. Can you imagine that county having to continue to meet the state mandated fixed costs that will jeopardize that county's viability? In other words, our declining counties face a perpetual fixed cost to support the full array of county elected constitutional officers. They're here, they're not going away. They face the cost of maintaining the courthouse, the buildings of the county, yet their population is declining in its aging, and it's losing its young people. So I conclude by giving this example of the potential cost savings that would occur had you combined a financially weaker county, a declining county, with at least an adjacent financially stronger county. And I recently just completed a study of such a consolidation. I undertook to complete, I did a fiscal analysis of 2 counties, one's declining, one's weaker, one's stronger, to see what the savings would be were those counties to consolidate. Used financial information from the Carl Vinson Institute of Government and also from the final annual audit report of these counties. The potential reductions that I found for the individual taxpayer were truly, truly substantial. The per capita cost of the declining county that would be consolidated with the stronger adjacent county dropped from almost $3,000 a person. I'm using round figures. They were actually 998 to be exact. And they dropped from $3,000 a person in round figures to $1,000 a person had they combined with the adjoining county. That shows that the individual taxpayers of the declining county were paying almost 3 times more than the taxpayers of the financially stronger county. Even if you looked at individual functional classifications, even the general government per capita cost of the declining county was almost 5 times higher than the cost of the financially stronger county. So public safety was almost a 3-to-1 ratio in judicial. The per capita cost was almost 6 times higher than that of the financial stronger county, because there was nothing happening there in that county. There's just no activity. So I give you this, and I have completed this study. It's a fairly, not a long study, but it completely goes into a lot of statistical financial information. I'm not at liberty to share the names of the county. I want to send the study to the leadership of both counties and get their reaction to it. And then following that, I may send the study to the state bar. I've had several articles published in the bar, and they may or may not have guts to publish this one, but they published the double tax article and they also published the municipalization article. But I would close by saying that one other point. There was an added cost to the taxpayers of the absorbing county. I constructed a hypothetical budget, and their millage rate did increase about a little over 1.6 mils. But the declining county that was absorbed, their millage rate prior to consolidation was over 20 mils.
Mm.
So you can see the contrast there. It's just huge. Now, the taxpayers of the absorbing county would probably be blown away by the fact they're going to have to pay $1.5 million more. But let's go back and say that. Well, let me conclude by saying this. I think that the state of Georgia has a real service delivery issue with regard to our declining counties. I think the state should provide transitional grants to help these declining counties consolidate. For example, in the case of this county I've just studied, they could provide a hold harmless grant to hold harmless the absorbing county, the added cost in the absorbing county, and phase it out over 3 to 5 years. So I think you've got a great opportunity. The state has a great opportunity to do something about our declining rural counties. Now, I'll close by sort of quoting from a long-term friend, Representative Larry Walker. Larry Walker in 1985, he said, "Jim, you've got to use a carrot and stick approach. Help them with a new courthouse, help them with a jail, help them with a school. That's the only way you're going to make it work." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This has been wonderful information, and I would ask if there's any question, and I think I do have one right here. Chairman Oliver?
The regional commissions have had this authority for some time. I forget.
Yes, since 2010.
Has there been any effort of any regional council to follow through with using this authority?
It's been very limited. Two of the regional commissions do provide regional transportation services, which is a good example. One of the regional commissions provides tax parcel information, keeping it up to date. Another one helps with solid waste collection and disposal. I actually ended up calling all of the regional commissions to see what they did, and those were the few examples I got. The most extensive assistance by the regional commission was the Athens Regional Commission, North Georgia Regional Commission under Jim Dove. And they provided assistance to the Bear Creek project, Bear Creek Reservoir, which was a huge project that was coordinated by the regional commission. But those about all the examples I could find. I think that I think there is a reluctance by city and county officials to really turn over their functions.
Well, my question really is going to the constitutional officers. Using your example of the jails, which seems like an obvious thing that you want to consolidate.
Oh, it'd be
I
great.
assume the sheriffs would oppose that mightily.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
Then
Oh,
we
they-
continue to grant to the sheriffs.
The sheriffs, constitutional officers would oppose everything I'm talking about. That is a problem. And obviously you're going to have, I think, some extensive legal work done to sort through this system. Now, you can get rid of county officers through the Constitution. We did it in Columbus. We had authority to get rid of the tax commissioner, to get rid of the probate court. That the only officer that was protected was the sheriff in that enabling statute. But we did it. Now we ended up not getting rid of the tax commissioner because we had a very practical business-like commission that I worked for there, and they when the tax commissioner, constitutional officer, came before the commission and said, "Gentlemen, if you get rid of my office, I'm going to tell everybody that comes by this window to vote against consolidation." And we backed away from it. We compromised.
My recent experience in law enforcement issues or in mental health transportation systems and others, that the sheriffs who represent rural areas have been very much taking a position in obstacle in many different ways. And I'm just kind of curious about the other local leaders, how they perceive that benefit to them to oppose cost-saving, more efficient services. Just, I don't represent rural areas, so I can't talk with any knowledge. I'm just kind of curious about the way in which the sheriffs have, from my direct experience, been pretty much in opposition to a number of different moves to save money and create better services.
Okay, thank you. Do you have another question? Okay. Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this very valuable information. I really appreciate it because we've done a lot with different representatives that have come to talk about new cities. And one of the things, as you're talking about rural, or whether it's rural or whether it's metropolitan, have we done any studies on how to convince people that this would be in their best interest, considering that each one of those groups already has someone that's representing them, to give up power? Because power seems to be the factor that stops communities from saving themselves sometimes in those positions, that even though your population has declined, but you still want to be in charge.
Oh, you're entirely right. It is a power issue. And it's easy for me to sit here and talk to you about all the great things you should do, because I'm not sitting in your shoes. You got to be elected and you've got to deal with this power issue all over the place. But the only point I would make, Ms. Representative, is that the train is going down we're going down this road. The state is going down this road. These cities will continue to lose population. And what's going to happen when there's no population there to protect the sheriff, regardless if he's only got 500 or 600 people? What difference does the power make? There's nothing. They won't even have enough money to pay his salary, or much less the other constitutional officers. I think the constitutional officer thing is somewhat of a blight in terms of our old service. Even the constitutional officers had themselves taken out of the Service Delivery Act. They're out of it. They don't have to comply. They do what they want to do. So
You have
anyway, I'm
another
sorry.
question. Let's see, Chairman Blackman.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Great presentation. Very interesting, sir. I very much like to have you back and hopefully talk a little bit more about this. I just wondered if through some of your, exploration discussions, et cetera, do you find there to be some sort of tipping point? Because I know that, the self-determination situation where you're talking about even cities across rural parts of the state may say that we don't necessarily want to grow, or we may want a specific type of growth or no growth at all, or, those kinds of things. Do you find that the cost savings to the individual, that there might be some sort of tipping point whereby somebody doesn't say, well, I kind of like the autonomy that I have. I'm willing to pay a little bit more for these services in order to retain that autonomy, not necessarily at the leadership level, as we've kind of been discussing, but more at the individual, family resident level.
I have no knowledge of those type studies. I think there could be a tipping point. For example, when I worked on city-county consolidations, I noticed that in some cases there was a tipping point when they began to realize the extensive duplication and waste and inefficiencies by having a county and a city. In that sense, I did notice some tipping point. I've often thought that with regards to regional commissions, there could be a tipping point there if they use more creative. I've often wondered why the university or some group didn't get out and work with these commissions to show them the creative types of things they could do to help, particularly the counties in the rural areas. But I don't. I think there is a tipping point, and I think that, for example, in the study I've just completed of this declining county with a more wealthy county, incidentally, there is a precedent for this. James and Hamilton County combined, that's in Tennessee. Hamilton County has the county seat of Chattanooga. They combined in 1919, and that's a good example of a weaker county combining with a stronger county. And the results, they got lower taxes, better streets, better schools. So there was the result. And I think if some way we could get this kind of information out to citizens, I can't believe that the citizens of this county I've just studied, when they could get a cost reduction from a $3,000 a person to $1,000 a person. If they could get a millage rate reduction from 20 some mills to a millage rate of 11.55 or 11.56, I can't believe they couldn't be sold on consolidation. I really believe that, but I don't think the information's out there. We don't have a way of getting it out there. And it's such a sensitive subject. I even have misgivings about even publishing this study, but I have decided to share it with the community. And one flaw of the study is I've not done it. You really need to you need to have a companion service analysis to make sure you're working out. What I did assumed that the service levels would be the same, that the absorbing county would take over the 10 deputies that were in the sheriff's department. But if you eliminate the salary of the sheriff, you get rid of the probate court, you get rid of the tax commissioner, you've saved over $500,000 just there in that county.
Thank you.
You have one more question, Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question is for you, or you may not be able to answer it. It may be for anyone else on the committee or in the room. My thought that I'm thinking about is when we were going through the cityhood meetings, in order to have a new city, there are all these studies that must take place.
Right.
And when we're talking about trying to let residents or constituents know about cost savings, my question is, are there any studies on return of investment or a cost benefit analysis of what these constitutional officer costs are in relation to, let's just say, their total revenue? So residents can actually see how much percentage, especially if it's a small area, how much percentage of just a salary is for the constitutional officers in regards to their total expenses for that region or area.
I do not know of any such studies. I really don't. I know that I just don't.
Anyone else?
Thank you. You have another, or that's it?
Well, I didn't know if, does anyone else know about anything like that?
I don't know of any myself either, but I'm sure before anything moved forward, that would be a major part of it. There does need to be a close comparison. I do want to add, we've had similar, like you said, when we were talking to cities, lack of services in certain areas, and that's why people wanted to incorporate. So there is a reason for this. Again, as we go through these meetings, I think we will discover more. Representative Bernal, did you have your light on? You want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, thank you for the information. And you were talking about getting the information out to the citizens. And that was one of the issues I had in terms of voting for the cities, was that sometimes the individual who was bringing the city, I think in one case it was for a park, but not necessarily for all of the essential services. And so the residents, they didn't really know that maybe they were only going to be responsible for they were going to get a park, but then they were still going to be responsible for other things like the police, the fire, the sewage, and the roads, and all that other stuff. And so I do agree that we have to be able to find a way to make sure that people understand, if they vote for those cities, how much it's really going to cost them. And I don't think that in some cases we were completely honest. And I do think that the information you gave about balancing, to make sure that if I'm going to go this way, that I'm going to at least get the same that I had before or more, not that I'm going to get less and then have to pay more.
Right. I understand.
Thank you very much. And we really appreciate everything that you've brought to us today. I think you just hit on it, Representative Bernal. Communications is a very important part of all of this. I would ask that if you would, after you complete your report, if you would share it with our committee, and we will probably look at it next year. But it is something, this is not going to go away. And we do appreciate very much your sharing with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another speaker coming up next. We're very happy to have Douglas Eves here, and he too brings a great amount of history and information that has to do with local service delivery. They're from a lot of perspectives. What we have heard already today, I think, has been very good for all of us to hear the differences. And I'm going to share, because we heard the same problems, whether you were in urban or if you were in rural. So there is a lot to be said about making sure communications are made. But right now, this committee is trying to identify what's going on. So we do appreciate it. Now, if you would go ahead, Mr. Evans. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, my name is Douglas Eves. I'm head of Eves Consulting Group. I work with counties around the state on service delivery strategy, negotiations, loss negotiations, tax equity studies. I spent over 20 years in county management. I'm from I saw he's left, but I'm from Warner Robins, a lifelong resident of Georgia. Counties in Georgia have three major goals related to service, to delivery of county services. The first is to be able to provide the needed services of our citizens in an efficient, effective, and productive manner. The second is to obtain maximum flexibility in the delivery of those services and in the financing of those services. And the final, and perhaps the most important, and we've talked about it here some today already, is to reduce the conflict in the delivery of those services. I was very interested in Ms. Burgess' statements because I found there were more in common that we had to discuss, that areas that we could work on, and there were disagreements. And I thought that was productive, and I thought that was going to lead to some of our future efforts. Government should be run like a business when possible. That's a given. There should be strategic goals, performance metrics, and accountability. The mechanisms for the delivery of services should be constantly explored for methods of improvement, including functional consolidation. When we talk about consolidation, we must forget that very important part between political entities. Any impediment to the delivery of services should be examined for cause and resolution. My testimony will start at that point. The best way to avoid a misunderstanding is to have an understanding. Unfortunately, municipalities and counties don't always have a clear consensus or an understanding of their own, or much less the others' powers and service responsibilities. So if they don't have that basic understanding sometimes, how is it hard to negotiate service deliveries? That explains why it's so difficult sometimes to negotiate these political or service delivery strategies. These misunderstandings results in confusion, conflict, and constrains the provision of services in Georgia. The statutory service system established in the General Assembly to address and resolve the competition-based pressures on counties and cities is well-intentioned, but needs to be reimagined. No less than every decade, county and city elected officials come together to resolve SDS, lost, and other service delivery-related issues. Sometimes these negotiations are efficient, productive, and lead to the results consistent with the intent of the General Assembly. However, such outcomes are the exception. It is much more common for these negotiations to be acrimonious, inefficient, or result in the fraying of relationships, and those important relationships that are needed, and opportunities for optimally efficient government. The reasons for such failures are varied, but having participated in many of these negotiations throughout the state, I can tell you with some authority that one of the main reasons is because there are no mutually understood foundational concepts. Every negotiation seems to begin with a blank slate. Part of that is because we have a lot of new commissioners, new council members, and mayors. But part of it is because we don't have a firm basic grasp of what the underlying concepts are that are needed. The General Assembly could greatly aid the efforts of cities and counties in wading through and ultimately achieving success in these negotiations by codifying various foundational concepts. For instance, that roads are a countywide function that preceded Amendment 19, and by providing greater clarity regarding the use of insurance premium taxes and other unincorporated source revenues. Those tend to be two of the bigger issues that resolve or devolve into the service delivery quagmire that causes confusion and hard feelings. To address the provision of services from a county perspective, it is critical to note the origin of counties in the state of Georgia and the purpose originally served by the counties. The power and authority of counties, including their home rule provisions, are constitutional. The service responsibilities are threaded throughout the official code of Georgia. Counties, unlike municipalities, are charged with certain mandated services. I've provided you a handout courtesy of the ACCG that shows the mandated services that counties are required to perform. They don't have the pick three option as municipalities do to remain an active municipality. They have to provide all of these services. Counties are creatures of the Constitution, while cities are municipal corporations and creatures of the General Assembly. There is a difference. Counties in Georgia were formed as political subdivision of the state of Georgia to serve as an arm of the state to deliver at the local level the state services. They are local, legal, political subdivisions of the state created out of its territory for civil and political purposes, particularly for the purpose of administering locally the general powers and policies of the state. Included in these locally administered state functions are courts, law enforcement, probate of states, recording of deeds, transfers, all property records, assessing and collecting taxes, health and welfare, and bridge and road maintenance. Any additional granting of services not covered by general law would require a constitutional amendment, such as in 1972, the General Assembly placed Amendment 19 before the voters. Amendment 19 would allow counties to perform 14 expansive and enumerated municipal type services in addition to and supplementary of the powers already possessed are conferred upon counties and municipalities. Amendment 19 delivered a sea change to the governmental structure. Municipalities unfortunately saw it as an equalization of power that would hinder their ability to annex population centers and to develop their tax bases. The Urban Growth Subcommittee in 1972 saw it as the leading mechanism to deliver functional consolidation. And one of the underlying reasons was to avoid all of the permissive local amendments that were pervasive at the time. I think at the year that this was introduced, they said there were 106, and they were anticipating another 106 local amendments the next year. That provided a great lack of uniformity in service delivery throughout the state. The state was basically granting authority throughout and not having any real means of delivering that uniformity. They decided to do so through the Amendment 19. And basically their statement that started off the introduction in the House Journal said it should be realized that significant improvements in local service delivery will not occur unless local governments consider the alternative approaches, whether annexation, city-county consolidation, or functional consolidation. The last approach being one of the effects of the Local Government Equalization Amendment. They were looking for alternatives at that time to county annexation or to the formation of newer cities or the consolidation. Many of these would work in different areas, but they wanted to go to the basic approach first, functional consolidation. From this point forward, counties had a duality to their nature. On one hand, they remained arms of the state for those provisions of state mandated services, but they also became true general purpose governments, able to meet the growing service needs of their citizens. The report by the Department of Community Affairs, and they do a wonderful job assisting counties and cities, showed how that growth is still occurring. In 1972, this is being primarily driven by the suburbanization of areas around the Fulton County and those growing counties. It was being driven by the Eisenhower interstate system as that developed throughout the state. And you would be developing certain economic centers based around those interstates that were separated from the county centers, because when they built the interstate system, it was built outside of city limits because of land pricing. As those exits built up, economic centers started to develop. It wasn't simply because the counties did not want to have intercontractual arrangements with the cities. Perhaps at the time, a great deal of it was not economically feasible for our cities to run those type of services out to that geographical area. Counties were being forced at that time, or being asked to maintain that economic growth, and to do so, these services were added to their capabilities, and they would be funded by special service districts that were created out of all that amendment as well in the Article 9 to be able to fund that without double taxation issues. Competition and conflict did occur. In 1997, the governor and the General Assembly formed the Georgia Futures Commission. And the result was, part of it was the service delivery strategies now codified in Title 36, Chapter 70. One of the primary needs of counties is clarity in that statute. that the geographical restrictions found in the supplementary powers is not necessarily tied to benefits. That services restricted to and performed in the unincorporated areas, such as parks and recreation, can have a countywide benefit. Another point of clarification that we would appreciate would be deals with tax equity concerns related to primary benefit. The service delivery statute says that any service that primarily benefits the unincorporated of the county should be funded with unincorporated source revenues. The counties have no issue with that because that's where the provision is primarily benefiting. That's where it should be funded. There's two major issues with that. One is, how do you define primarily? Is it 50%? Is it 90%? And how is it quantified, since in reality it's a quality and usage issues? The statutes we're hoping should also clarify that usage is just one benefit, and definitions should include secondary and tertiary benefits. And when I talk about secondary and tertiary, for example, secondary would be agricultural growth in the unincorporated areas where the farmers need to be able to get their product to the market. That's the secondary usage of roads. Third would be, a tertiary benefit would be public education, where we have to deliver students from the rural area to the schools that are primarily located in the municipal areas. Another point of clarity that the General Assembly could provide is to deliver resolution on the funding mechanisms allowed to the special service districts to establish to deliver services that primarily benefit the unincorporated area. Whether established under Title 36, Chapter 70, or Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 6, the General Assembly should clarify that any revenue raised from restricted areas such as special service district or the unincorporated areas, such as franchise fees, assessments, taxes, business license, alcohol, excise, and licenses, should be expended in the special service district. Any revenue, a general rule that could be implemented is that any revenue that must be transferred from the unincorporated area to a new city or to a newly annexed area should be in the absence of that incorporation or that annexation available to the special service district to fund those services. Any zero-sum negotiations by its nature has winners and losers. When you have winners and losers, you also unfortunately have hard feelings. The state should develop a formula for the distribution of lost. As someone mentioned earlier, we're going through that now, where it's basically, again, generating hard feelings, contentious issues, lack of understanding about what the real paradigms are in making those negotiations. It is recommended that an equalized distribution calculation be put in place at the DOR that would replace this negotiation, such as an equity calculation that would say that the sales tax would generate an equal percentage on each entity's ability to pay, or pay an equal percentage of their total tax burden. Now, that calculation could be easily done similar to the current usage by the T-SPLOST, where the Department of Audits and Accounts has to go back and verify the numbers, and then in the absence of an IGA, generate a number for the distribution of that T-SPLOST. Another issue of loss is that in the current law statutes in 48.8, municipal residents receive two separate and distinct rollbacks. That's one on their county tax bill for countywide services, another one on municipal tax bills paying for municipal services. Now, that's appropriate, but the unincorporated resident in special service district receives the benefit of just the rollback on their county tax bill. If they have a special service delivery district delivering those same type of municipal services that the municipal resident is receiving benefit for, they do not receive any loss credit for that. They should be treated as a political entity, able to get the benefit of the relief for their municipal services, just as the city does. The special service district should be treated as a political entity and receive a loss share to cover their municipal services. Otherwise, it appears that there may be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. And the reason that this is important is that the special service districts are one of the very viable options to annexation and new cities and for the provision, delivery of these services. Counties need maximum flexibility in providing and funding the state mandated services. Any new funding mandate from the state should have a dedicated funding mechanism. All fees established by statute should be subject to review at least biannually, or in the absence of that, An inflation rider to the acts would be sufficient to cover rising costs. Counties do remain concerned about land use efforts and capital development to provide services that are disrupted by annexation and new cities. Counties are concerned about changes in density on its borders in the unincorporated areas and new land usages that would impact the service delivery within that unincorporated area. In 2015, your study committee on annexation, de-annexation, excuse me, and incorporation noted there are several alternatives to incorporating a new municipality that provides a more orderly process and decreases the negative financial impact in the county. My good friend, Ms. Burgess, who I met today, but I've studied extensively in my readings, mentioned the North Carolina annexation statutes and how they were expansively allowed. In 2012, the state of North Carolina ended those expansive annexation guidelines because they were becoming cumbersome and burdensome to the state and had been abused. My understanding is that the word abuse, that it had been abused and it was an inability to regulate it. All I know is that in 2012, it was terminated. Perhaps he can share what they replaced it with and what their current mechanisms are. I'd be very interested to hear that. The special service districts are local government entities that are designed to target taxes and services to a particular area within a county. It has to be remembered that special service districts can target specific services. Municipalities are based upon two foundations. One, the delivery of a higher level of service. And in its original configuration, cities were designed as municipal corporations with the capacity to build a larger share of debt, provide municipal services such as water and sewer and such things. The state was hesitant to let counties take on. So they created municipal corporations to achieve that debt and set up a separate tax function to achieve those types of services that were needed. And this was basically a result of the 1877 Constitution that continued to grow because they wanted to limit the county's abilities to take on additional debt after the Civil War days. Like I said, counties need that flexibility. If the facts necessitate a need for a new city, then the incorporation process is decided by all impacted voters is a fair and just outcome. If certain protections are in place, we must look at alternatives first to avoid financial and service disruptions. This committee has a very good rule in place requiring that legislation to create a new city should only be introduced in the first year of the biennial session and voted on in the second year only without any changes in the borders or the boundaries of the proposed municipality. That rule should be codified to ensure that your current wisdom, it becomes a guiding principle, because that rules can be changed. We need to have that codified because that is a great mechanism that you've developed. It has to be put, and the studies that were talked about earlier about the financial studies can solve. One of the points that one of the representatives brought up was studies. Part of your studies that are taking place should also look at any services that are not being picked up by the new city. What are going to be the service delivery mechanisms in place at that time to continue to provide for those services? Is it going to fall on the county? Is it going to fall on the unincorporated area? How are they going to fund it? For example, just in the city of South Fulton, who just started in 2017, their 2 years was up in 2019. They're still working with the county of Fulton on a long list of what services are going to be produced. Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And unfortunately, the county says, we can't, because we can't provide it in your area. We can't continue to do so. We don't have a funding mechanism to accomplish that. We need to address that at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. New city referendums should be countywide, or at a minimum, include the entire unincorporated population of the county. The new incorporation will impact more than just the new city area. It's going to impact that unincorporated area because you're going to have a reduction in revenue. You're going to have new density borders on your new densities, growth on your borders, and different land uses. It's going to change the service delivery. It's going to affect economies of scale and for the counties for the delivery of their services. One approach to the issue related to annexation, new cities and special service districts is the incentivization of functional consolidations and increased usages of SSDs. Yes, our smaller counties are suffering, and they need to look at functional consolidation. It's going to become critical for the survival of our smaller counties with low population totals and digest insufficient to generate the required revenues to provide for those mandatory services and the constitutional officers. We need to find alternatives. Regionalization of those services and consolidation of county, city, and city services at the functional level will be needed as population shifts become older and digest values remain fixed. Any constitutional function such as jail needs statutory approval. In my opinion, any already allowed non-constitutional service allowed by general law could be consolidated by existing home rule authority. Any impediment should be removed. Incentives for consolidation could be authorizing profits for sharing proprietary services that are shared across counties. The sharing of franchise fees to the county to assist their funding of any portion of a jointly funded service. But also I want to note on these franchise fees, any franchise fees that a municipality receives, the county should receive for the same services in their unincorporated area that are delivered there. But I also want to say, if you look at the electrical territorial maps by the Public Service Commission, the area that's delivering these franchise fees to the municipalities extends out beyond the city's borders. So what you have in effect is unincorporated residents subsidizing municipal services. That money should become available to counties as an incentive to be used to start funding some of these consolidated services as well. State aid grants to formulate and promote the services would be beneficial. The entities should work with DCA and the regional commissions. Regional commissions would be the tool of the DCA at the local level to help implement these services, or instead to help be the foundation where some of these consolidated services start to grow and develop. As Mr. Saines asked one of his questions earlier, was what services does the RC typically present? Mapping GIS, identifying service boundaries is one of the biggest portions, and assisting with SDS negotiations is two of the primary tools that come to my mind that that the regional commissions help. Also, they'll work with the census data, population studies. They do a tremendous service for counties from when I was in county management. In closing, Madam Chair, it is in the best interest of the state and our citizens that cities and counties, the service delivery providers at the point of the spear, work together and have a clarity of purpose. The conflicts existing in the current intergovernmental relationships are constraining service delivery, prohibiting the deficient delivery of services, constraining functional consolidation that is needed. We don't need to necessarily look at consolidating counties at this point in time, but we need to look at functional consolidation, including we need to have a strong examination of jails. I believe jails should definitely be on a regionalized basis, and we need to look at the constitutional officer and have their input and buy-in where possible. But the General Assembly needs to take the lead in developing those efforts. The state needs these entities to work together and not beat each other's throats. Counties are willing and anxious to do their share to mitigate the conflicts, develop understandings, and avoid the misunderstandings and hard feelings that have hindered our services to the public. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions. You also have my written statement that I presented earlier, plus the ACCG handout on mandatory services. I submit those, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a lot of good information. I do have a question, and I guess it's a legal issue. Everything isn't centered around, as we've talked before, we're not going to come in and say, you've got to consolidate.
Exactly.
This is something that needs to be taken up. And there's some of the issues we really didn't get into here because they're within the cities or within counties. You have communities that we talked about wanted to become cities because they were not getting the services that they wanted. Is there a format? Is there a place that the local, whether it be city or county, I think it's going back to the communications. Where are our folks going when they are not happy? We've seen in the news a lot lately where people are unhappy and they go to city school boards or city meetings of some type. Are they paying attention? And where I'm going with this is we've been talking about our small communities that are not able to sustain themselves. We have large counties and large cities where the citizens feel like they're not being heard. I know I am in a small county. My commissioners have maybe 8 or 10,000 people that they represent. You'll have a large county where one commissioner represents 200,000 people. Now, where is their say being heard? They're feeling disenfranchised because they don't have a closer connection to what they consider their seat of government. So again, this is not something here. It's just I'm sharing some of the things that we have heard. I was on redistricting, and one of the things that we heard was people wanted to be closer to the people making their decisions. And I'm questioning, how can somebody represent 200,000 people on a county or local level? It's one of those things. So you may have some too small and you may have some counties too large. The same thing with cities. I'm not saying to split them up. I'm just recognizing an issue and what we have seen over the last couple of years. So I don't know if you've got an answer to that or not.
I don't have an answer, but you're exactly right. The desire for a high level of service, the desire to be closer to your seat of government has always been the driving force behind the municipality or the incorporation premise. Part of that grows from a misunderstanding about what a county services really deliver. City officials and sometimes city residents have a misunderstanding that because you're a city, that you're a citizen of the county, that the county should provide services to the city. Cities are separate political entities, they're not a creature of the county, they're a separate entity. So they have their own service responsibilities that they need to provide. What we need to provide our citizens are alternatives, such as the functional consolidation or the special service districts where the county goes. You're exactly right. Some of these counties have 7 or 8 7 commissioners representing, one commissioner might be representing 100 or 250,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a smaller county, you may have the same 7 representatives, and that one represents 2,000 people.
That's right.
And it's just, there's economies of scales and all that. My real fear is for those smaller counties like Truitland and the counties in the southern part, Dooley was brought up earlier, that have a stagnant population. The numbers that the DCA representatives showed were the population below the I-16 line, the southern part of the state. They said population was growing there, but that tends to be central or located in just a few areas, for where the majority of those counties are either stagnant or reducing. That population is getting older, more minority driven, and they don't have the economic foundation to continue to fund these services. They don't have the tax base to continue to provide those services. That's where the real efforts to regionalization, regional consolidation by the regional commission helping to deliver that. Those counties, unfortunately, also usually don't have the expertise or the capabilities to deliver and to study what needs to be done. That's where the Carl Institute of Government should be able to come in, do some studies and look at what's economic, and counties should be given that flexibility. Unfortunately, at some point, we're going to have to look at constitutional officers, because what happens is it's not a question of counties not wanting to fund these. One, they can't. Two, what ends up happening is in our jails and our sheriffs, they just can't provide the next necessary level of services because they don't have the tax base or the population to draw the workers from to deliver those services. So they are trying to do the same amount with much less, but who suffers are the inmates who are in the jails because they're not getting that standard decency of care. We're having the potential of lawsuits in those issues because we're not having a standard of care. We're not having efficient delivery of services because they just can't afford it. So we're going to have to say, all right, constitutional officers, there has to be a certain minimum level, minimum standard of services that are going to be required for your constitutional officer to remain effective in this county. If not, we're going to have to look at some regional efforts. That is not something counties can do. That's not something the cities can do. That's something the General Assembly is going to have to do. And that's probably going to take a constitutional amendment of some type to deliver that type of change.
Well, that's why we're here to investigate, and we're turning over these stones and we're finding what's under them.
Exactly.
And it will not be an easy task. I don't think we're going to just come with a solution for everything. It needs to be looked at, and we will.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
do have another question for you. Representative Maynard, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It is a very timely conversation. And today, this morning, literally, I had a Fulton County resident calling me, asking me about such things. And I said, we have a special study committee going on. And I kid you not, I gave him the link for him to sign on. And since we've been having this discussion, he's been texting me left and right on all the things that what everyone is saying is absolutely correct. So he is one of the examples of living in a community where you cannot speak to your elected officials in the way that you want to, and the type of services that you're getting because of how large Fulton County is.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
speaking of Fulton County. And so I encouraged him to come in person. I see on here, we do have a Atlanta resident. I don't know what that Atlanta resident is going to say, but there are definitely people in Fulton County that have some concerns about what we're saying. So it's not just a rural issue. There are people in urban Atlanta that are just as much affected by this.
Absolutely correct. And in full disclosure, Fulton County is one of my clients that I'm currently representing. So I've had a chance to analyze and do quite a great deal of research into the Fulton County area and the service deliveries and the incorporation of products that have taken place over the past 17 years. One thing I can say, you're absolutely right. And the citizens that you're talking about is right, that it is hard to reach. They have 7 and they may represent
175,000. right now.
Exactly. One thing that I will say on behalf of the county, and I'm not a spokesman for the county, but they've recently built up the communications between the county and the mayors. They've reinstituted the mayors' meetings that they're having on a monthly basis. So that's another delivery mechanism of communication I do know the county representatives are very proud of and want to maintain, and the city have tended to have that buy-in as well. So that's one avenue that's necessary. But again, I think unfortunately, as the new city's trend manifested itself in Fulton County, there was not always a clear understanding of what services the new cities were going to pick up and what cities the county was going to remain. And I think that's caused that there was no bad intent. It's just that the results were there was hard feelings, confusion, and whenever you have that confusion and you don't know who to reach, who to talk to, then you have hard feelings and you feel out of touch with your government. And I think that's exactly what's been happening.
I do have a question for you regarding the jails. So and this is just due to my ignorance of not knowing, but I understand if we have in rural areas, too many jails in a very small area. So it would be more cost effective and better quality services for the inmates if those were consolidated. When you're looking at, say, Fulton County and we're overpopulated in the jail, what does that,
It leads
explain to me how that happens?
It
Not
happens.
how it happens, but how do we fix that problem when we're trying to consolidate? Is there a de-annexing out of a jail? Like, what is the solution for that?
I'm not familiar with the term de-annexing out of
made
the
it
jail.
up.
But I will say that they are looking at the jail very closely. They're looking at repurposing some of the lost, if they can recover some of the lost, to help expand the jail facilities, provide the much needed services. They do provide the service for the municipal citizens. Typically, municipalities are the jailer of record for city inmates. And in Fulton County, the county is taking that on, so it's created quite a bit of an overload. Unfortunately, there's also a tremendous court backlog. COVID's part of that in Fulton County, but it's also part of it because the county just doesn't have the money to extend to solve the court backload. Without going through all those issues, because I don't want to focus on Fulton. You're Fulton County, and I understand it, but I want to expand it countywide. We're having that backlog throughout the state in courts, and that's causing real public safety issues throughout the state because of that backlog. We can't get the inmates through the court system. They're being released back out. And unfortunately, that causes public safety issues. The county's going to have to address it, gentlemen. I know that they are, but I'm not party to all of their efforts that they're trying to accomplish and what all their long-term plans are. But I do know they're looking at that. But as far as what their long-range plans are, I'm not a spokesman for the county, so I can't really. I don't know what I know they have a few future plans they're working on, but what they are, I couldn't share with you because I don't know.
Thank you. Representative Bernal, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, thank you for all that valuable information. But I think one of the problems still goes back to communication, because what I find is that a lot of times citizens do not know who's responsible for what service. And so if I live in a city, there's certain responsibilities for a city. If I live in a county, there's certain county responsibilities. But then also for us as state reps and down here, we are not over them. So we cannot tell them what to do. And I think sometimes when people, citizens and their frustration, they want somebody to be able to tell the commissioner, you should do this, that, and the other, but that's not our responsibility. So I think we also have to, as our chair has said, one of the things that we will learn from this is that we have to make sure that people understand the roles of government. And a lot of times they don't. And so because they don't, it does cause frustration. And then somebody says, well, I want to have a city because I'm not represented, but not knowing all the things that are going to come along with that. Because you can't be mad at that police department, but then say, I'm still going to use that police department or that fire department. And then I've got to pay for something else. So I think that one of the great things of us having this, and I thank the chair for that, is that we will learn, and then we will be able to explain to our constituents what the roles are for each individual, depending on if they live under the county unincorporated, or if they live in the city plus unincorporated.
Yes, you're exactly right. And that's one of the things that I talked about, is that cities and counties don't always completely understand what their roles and powers are, much less their citizens. And I think you're right, the General Assembly cannot tell them what to do, or well, they can define what services are to be performed by the counties and what services are to be performed by the municipalities. They can't. Municipalities have a choice. If they're providing the three, then they're enacting. They don't they can do it by home rule. They can pick up if they choose to, but they're not required to do so. Counties are mandated certain services, and you can do by general law define what the service responsibilities of the county. What you can do is, because we have a good service delivery negotiation platform in place, it needs to be reimagined in some ways as far as understanding the concepts, terms, what our definitions of services are. I'll talk about roads being one, because that issue, counties have always had the ability or responsibility to maintain the road system. In fact, it's subject to mandamus in the official code of Georgia. If a service is subject to mandamus, that means it's ministerial and must be performed. It's not one of the discretionary supplementary services. We need to clarify that, because that's created more hard feelings, more attorney's fees, more consultant record than probably any other issue throughout the state, because that's one issue that we fight about the most. The other is sharing of administrative costs between the two entities. But if we get some of those small issues out of the way that causes that initial heartburn and conflict, then we can get down to the real issues that you're talking about, is what services the county is going to perform, what services the city is going to perform, where can we work together? Because those hard feelings that are generated in zero-sum negotiations where there's conflicts by not having an understanding in terms of what the law really says, that hinders our ability to go to the next step and start. We're so busy fighting on an issue that should be solved by the General Assembly that's already solved by law, really. It's just not understood. It could be defined better. And then once we get over having to fight about that stuff, we can get to the important issues of how we're going to consolidate services and really start working together, which was the original intent of the 1972 Urban Affairs Committee and putting Amendment 19 in place, and the real intent of the Georgia Futures Committee in helping counties and cities do that strategic planning by looking at your service delivery strategies.
Thank you. You have another question, Representative Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just
Thank you.
wanted to kind of drop back and ask for your concurrence, or if you agree with this statement. We talked a little bit about jail capacity, just for example.
Yes, sir.
And the couple of examples are rural areas that have more capacity than needed, urban areas that are overpopulated. It's not really a rural versus urban situation. We've got rural areas where we have jails that are antiquated, need to be replaced, and are overpopulated. Those sheriffs, which are constitutionally required to provide that jail space, are making other provisions by sending inmates to other jail adjoining counties under intergovernmental agreements and paying those expenses to meet their obligation. I guess my point, I just want to make sure that I don't misunderstand and that we're correct, that this is not really a rural urban situation.
Not at all.
It's a statewide situation, and there are potential solutions.
There are solutions, and you're absolutely right. It's a matter of economics primarily, that you have overcrowding in the larger rural urban areas because of the population growth, and in the smaller counties where you may not have capacity, but you also don't have that standard of care because they don't have the financial resources to provide the care necessary. I still remember that old jail in Johnson County that was right next to the courthouse. It was one little, basically 2 rooms. It had a one room up front. It was built in like the 20s or early teens, in the 19 teens, and it had a little concrete block wall, and it was that's what Johnson County had to house their inmates in. Fortunately, they were able to build a new jail in, I guess, 15 years ago. It's still functioning, but you're absolutely right. It's not a rural urban. Each county has its own inherent difficulties by the population growth at one level, and at the other end by not having the growth, by having the less populated, not have the digest sufficient to generate the revenues, provide the services that they need to provide. That's why I think we need to develop some minimum standard of care that for jails, and this is, if not, we're going to look at a regional effort, and we need to remove any impediments. And the DCA, through working through the RCs, need to be one of the driving forces, as long as the ACCG and the GMA, to identify mechanisms to consolidate this functional consolidation. I think your 2015 Committee on De-annexation, Annexation, and New Cities hit the nail on the head that we need to explore all alternatives, that we need to, and I think we have the tools. We just need to figure out how we're going to utilize them and put them in the right place.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have another question, Chairman Collins?
Well, it's just a kind of a comment. I live in one of those areas out in West Georgia. I live in the city of Villa Rica.
Yes.
And if you look at the growth that we've experienced in the north part of Carroll County, it's a more urban type area.
Right.
But when you get down into the southern part of our county, it's a rural area. I just visited West Carroll County over the weekend. And you can drive just a few miles into that area, and it's still farmland, still heavy poultry. You have agriculture that's everywhere. But then you come into Villa Rica, that's located just approximately 30 miles from here on the interstate, where you have a federal highway, and then you have 2 state highways that converge there in Villa Rica. And we have really grown tremendously. And with that, you have a county that's having to tiptoe. And what I mean by that is you have a southern part of our county. People don't want growth. They don't want subdivisions. They want to be able to go out and shoot their shotgun and shoot their pistol and grow their corn, have their cows, have their chicken houses. And then you have the service delivery that residents in maybe some of those peripheral areas outside of the municipality, they want to enjoy a better service and a higher grade of service than those folks that live in the southern and the western part of our county. And that creates a unique situation for our area. And then currently a portion of my district in Douglas County. If you've ever seen a county and a city government that are perfect for consolidation, it's Douglas County. Several years ago, before I joined the legislature or became a member of this body, I think the legislature did away with the city of Lithia Springs. It was dissolved. So then you have Douglas County, that's the county seat, really the only city in that county other than just the small growth that Villa Rica has had over into Douglas County. And for some reason, that whole area has just seemed to resist the notion of consolidation, even though you have the city of Douglasville juts out all the way to Thornton Road, almost into Fulton County, if you will, to provide city services and cuts through the heart of the county. But, it's a unique perspective when you start looking at these communities like I represent and the challenges. And I think, it's great to have this conversation and talk about tax equity. I don't care how I'm taxed. I just don't want to be double taxed.
Absolutely.
And I want to pay for what I get, and I want to get what I pay for. And I think a majority of the people, whether you're lower income, middle income, or higher income, doesn't necessarily matter, but you just want to be treated fairly. And I think this discussion is long overdue when we talk about this and talk about these issues that are facing local governments. I know I've sat there through numerous mediations over lost dollars and service delivery. And, it's always been the same thing. Well, this is what state law has been established as. And kind of beat my head against the wall a couple of times thinking, this is just not something that if a majority of the people understood exactly what it was we were doing, that they would agree with. So I'm glad to be here and be a part of this.
Thank you. Your district sounds like a microcosm of the state.
Exactly.
This is not just one place, it's
Exactly.
everywhere. So I really appreciate everyone participating. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. I want to thank everyone. This has been wonderful information. It will help us go forward. And I will share that we are going to have a panel discussion tomorrow, and we are going to have county commissioners from a little tiny county, one from a mid-size that also has worked in city governments, and we're going to have another from a larger county. So I think get ready with your questions and be prepared. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.